Welcome to Cultural Fluency Makers. I'm your host, David Wellisch. Each week, we welcome leaders to share how they stay ahead of the ever-changing consumer landscape. With today's cultural transformation, top brands need to understand diverse consumer segments from Gen Z, Hispanic, and LGBTQ+ to gamers, wine enthusiasts, and basketball fanatics in Iowa. Their marketing strategies require them to keep the pulse on their consumers, but also their brand in the category to continue to grow revenue for the long term. Cultural Fluency Makers is sponsored by Collage Group, the only cultural intelligence engine that provides brand and consumer insights on the why that drives consumer behavior and purchase decisions. Let's get started. I am so excited for this morning's episode and look forward to a dynamic and insightful dialogue. With me today, a dynamic leader specializing in transforming insights functions into strategic thought partners within leading organizations. She's all about designing environments where leadership thrives and ideas soar. She has worked for multiple industry leading organizations in the healthcare industry and is now the US and North American lead, consumer and business insights and analytics at Haleon. Tina Tonielli, welcome to the show.
Wow, thank you. That was quite an introduction. I appreciate that. I feel like I got a lot of pressure now. So I'm going to have to live up to that intro. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's always my pleasure to have conversations with you and to talk about the subject. It's one of my personal passion areas for sure.
Well, I am so excited to really learn from you and about you today. So why don't we get started? So I thought this would be the right place to begin, which is um, Tina, given America's rapidly changing demographic and cultural landscape, what role does inclusive marketing play in your overall marketing strategy? What has changed? How do you see it evolving? It's a big question.
Yeah, it is a big question. So let me see if I can tackle it. I think that for me, I've been in business for quite a while. I won't date myself and say how long, but it's been a while. And when I started in marketing, people would talk a lot about targeted marketing. We're going to target the African American consumer, we're going to target the Hispanic consumer. And very often that was the first thing that got cut because people, quote, couldn't afford it. It's too much money, too much money. And I think that we have to change our mindsets from targeted marketing to inclusive marketing. And it should be the starting point of your marketing and not the cherry on top of your marketing. It should be sort of like the base ice cream should be actually inclusive marketing and how you think about it. And what I mean by that, David, is when you look at the population of the United States and you look at where it is today and where it's going versus where it was 20 years ago, it's way more diverse than it was 20 years ago. And even if you look at Gen Z, it's more diverse than it is homogeneous. So if you're going to win in Gen Z, you're going to have to figure out how to navigate through a diverse culture of multi intersectional, lots of different kinds of people. You can't just appeal to that center homogeneity like we have done historically.
And clear, we work closely together, so I know all the amazing work that you guys are driving through the organization. How important is this for consumer organizations to get it right?
So I've characterized it to some people as it's like the next digital. So I think when people started thinking about digital marketing and e-commerce marketing, there were a few folks who were out there sort of pioneering that sort of capability, and people thought they were nuts. Oh, Amazon, that's crazy. They just sell books. So people kind of thought they were a little bit nutty and thought it was a specialized kind of approach. And I think for me, as I look at cultural diversity and understanding the intelligence of how to navigate that, that is becoming a necessity as we go forward. And I feel like I can see it so clearly in like 5 years. That is going to be where digital marketing was at that point. So if you want to be sitting in the place of I don't know what I'm doing, and now it's absolutely mandatory, and I'm losing share. And the reason I'm losing share is because I don't appeal to the diverse masses. You could wait, or you could do it now and have a competitive advantage going into that. So for me, I want to lean into the competitive advantage.
Gosh, Tina, I love the way you were putting this, and you brought me back many, many, many years ago, and now I'm dating myself. I was at AOL Time Warner, and
Uh-huh.
the discussion at the time, and I'm going back to like 2003, 2004. The discussion was, will advertisers want to put their ads where in user-driven content like social? And fast forward, right, like that, the social platforms drive so much of the advertising dollars. So I think you're exactly right, and I couldn't agree with you more. Now, it's not easy, right? Like, in some ways, I think it's made marketing. Diversity is exciting, but it's hard. So what's hard? What are the key challenges here?
So I think the very first quote hard challenge, to rock to push up the hill is the mindset shift. Because I think you have a lot of people for a long time, they try to market to not offend people. Honestly, like I feel like it was, can we go for the least offensive thing that we can advertise? And so you end up with the most generic, marketed to the average middle, which by the way, nobody sits in the average middle. So you're actually
Right.
marketing to nobody because you're trying to offend nobody. So I feel like that, and people are afraid to offend anybody. So it's sort of like, okay, let's go for the most basic, non offensive, middle of the road advertising that we could ever possibly do. And then brands wonder why they don't have an emotional connection to consumers. So it's like, yeah, that's kind of the reason. So I think now, and I know we've had lots of conversations about this. I love how you guys think about this. It's about finding that passion point that is a red thread that can connect multiple groups. But you have to understand the different groups and what drives them in order to find that red thread. Like you're not going to find the red thread by going out and learning at the average. You're going to have to go out there and say, okay, which of these groups might be important to my brand and to my category and to my company? Now I need to go out and make sure I really understand those different groups and what might be a red thread that connect them. Like I know one of the things you guys have found in the past is family and the importance of family. Well, that's important to Black families. That's important to Hispanic families. That's important to everybody. But that's especially important to some families. And that's like a driver of their connectivity. So, how do you highlight something that's important to one group that also appeals to the others? And I think that to me that's the mindset shift. But it's hard for people to wrap their heads around.
That is great. So, insights that cut across segments that then allow you to zoom back and generate messaging that resonates across, but driven by deep insights by segment.
Yeah, it's almost like I've heard people talk about inclusive design, right? So people talk about inclusive design. There's, I think, a parallel there. Like if you do inclusive design where you go out and understand how to make things easier for people with disabilities, right? You can actually make things better for everybody. So if you understand different unique groups and understand what's motivating to them, you can actually find something that's motivating to them and motivating to the masses and actually unify people versus divide people or just appeal to no one.
I love that. And obviously, the younger generations are demanding us to go there with them, right? Vanilla, right? Like,
Yeah. Well, David, that's where I'm going in terms of like, if you look at where we're going to be in 10 years, it's not going to be an option. Like you will lose in the marketplace in 10 years. And I think even now we're seeing some of what Gen Z is doing. I would say it's going to be interesting to see in the political world what's going to happen because Lord knows they're sort of bringing a tidal wave into what's going on now, I think. So I think Gen Z is going to surprise people. And I think you got to get ahead of that. They have different expectations and they're very loud.
100%. That is great. So, I have the benefit and the privilege of moderating many roundtables with CMOs and leading insights and marketing strategy leaders. And most marketers will say that being culturally fluent or culturally relevant is essential to win consumers' hearts and minds today. How would you define cultural relevance or cultural fluency, and how do you become it?
So for me, when I think about our company and how we've approached this, David, we've looked at it and said, okay, we started with who are the consumers in the United States who aren't heard and sort of reflected in advertising, don't feel like they're being heard. And then we prioritize those groups for us as a company and said, okay, if we look at the the sort of types of conditions that we treat and things that we can do in terms of helping people, where do you have a lot of people who have a lot of the conditions that we have who feel like they haven't been heard? And that's where we feel like we can make the biggest difference. So for us, think of that as like the bullseye sweet spot. And we better understand those people first. So if we understand them, you kind of have that prioritization within that group to say, those are the people that we want to understand at a much deeper level. And we might fish for those unique insights within those groups and look for things that might unite them. And by the way, also connect to that outer ring of folks who aren't feeling like they're being left behind, but they might suffer from our conditions and, be really important to us as well. So I think for us, there's this opportunity of there's people who haven't been heard or represented or listened to for a long time, and they're an opportunity group for us as we think about everyday health. That's our purpose, is to bring everyday health to more people. How do we do that for people, especially those who've not felt like they've been listened to and heard and taken care of?
Thank you for sharing, because it's a great strategic approach. Tina, do you feel like there's a trade-off? Are we trading anything off with this cultural fluency approach versus the targeted approach of going segment by segment? Is there a trade-off here, or do you think that clearly the efficiency win is there? Is the effectiveness win there as well?
So I am the kind of person where I like to have my cake and eat it too, David.
I love that.
So, so in our company, the way we talk about it is inclusive marketing is table stakes. Like you have to do the inclusive marketing. So you should understand who your priority segments are, understand them, how you're going to grow, look for that red, connective thread that you need to, that's basic, almost like basic marketing now going forward. That targeted marketing is still an opportunity space. So you still could say, I want to double down with Hispanic consumers. I want to double down with people with disabilities or the neurodivergent. Like you might find that you want to double down and do some targeted marketing with those groups. I think that the watch out there, honestly, is to be led with your heart and your mind, because what I've seen a lot is, because it's hard to maintain that commitment, pressure, funding for those groups. So the
Right.
people who tend to drive that tend to have a lot of heart for it, but you have to have the brain and heart, i.e., what's the financial return on investment, and are we investing at the right level to get that financial return? Because if you have a lot of heart, but you leave and you bring someone in who doesn't have the heart and is all about the brain, if you don't have the data to back up your investment, then it's going to get lost. But if you get that data and you can say, and by the way, it's contributing 50% of the growth to our business, then that person who comes in isn't as emotionally connected will maintain it going forward. So that's the watch out, I think.
I love that. We think about hearts and minds of consumers,
Yes, hearts and
right?
minds
Right.
of marketers. Yeah.
But I love that, and obviously marketing is just changing so much, and ultimately the role of data and the role of ROI and the role of financial returns. I mean, it's an imperative.
Yeah.
It's a must. And you're right. The question is, how do you infuse heart within those parameters? I mean, that, right? Like that's what it's all about. And I think it's a fantastic analytical puzzle and an intellectual challenge. So backlash. So many people obviously follow, the stories of some brands having gone a little bit wrong.
Yeah.
Um, it's top of mind of many marketers, especially in a country where fragmentation and polarization continues to unfortunately grow.
Yeah.
Obviously, we see it in the political landscape.
Yeah.
Uh, is it top of mind for you, for your teams, and how are you guys navigating it?
Yeah. So I would say, as we think about purpose and doing things that are sort of beyond our products. So, how are we going to take a stand and help people or sort of take more of a stance beyond our products? We are led by, I would say, two things that I think will keep most brands at least on track. Or at least I would say I could stand up and take whatever backlash comes is number one, it needs to be authentic to your brand. So you can't go out there if you don't have the sort of the walk to back it up and just do the talk. So don't just put a rainbow on your whatever for the month of June and think that you're going to be able to sort of back that up. Like that's not, you have to make sure that you're really all in. And the thing that you're putting out there and talking about, like we had Advil, see my pain, hear my pain, because a lot of Black consumers, really Black patients, as they go in and talk to their doctors about their pain, are not heard in the right way. Their pain is not treated in an unbiased manner. So we
Yeah,
wanted to amplify their voices and say, let's try to teach doctors how to listen more empathetically to their patients. So that makes sense coming from a pain reliever, if you know, like, so for us, that was like an injustice that we wanted to go out there and stand for and help fix, but it really connected to our brand. And then I think the other piece of it is, so it needs to connect to your brand authentically and not just appear like you're just trying to get money.
yeah,
And then the other piece of it is, I think it needs to be really authentic to that community. So it might connect to your brand. What we did is we went out and partnered with the Morehouse School of Medicine and really just went out and talked to Black creators and really connected in an authentic way in that program. So for us, the beauty of that was it connected to our brand and it was authentically connecting to the purpose and the people that we were trying to help. And that to me is magical. And we've gotten shortlisted for Cannes Awards. And like there's been lots of really positive things. And it's grown our business, by the way. It's because, by the way, when you do those two things really well, people win and companies win. And that's to me, that's the magical place.
that feels like a win-win-win. So first, it began with insight once again, right? Kernel, like if you're able to get to the kernels of insight, great things happen. Down the road. Secondly, you gotta understand yourselves, right? As a brand, what do I stand for? What's our purpose? Then back to consumer insights, so we can connect both. And I guess would you say that in the event, because we can control the world, that some reaction takes place, that it would be easier to double down and triple down because you've done your work.
Yes, we've done our homework and we know what our purpose is and we know why we're doing it. So if somebody comes back to us and says, you know what, I don't believe you should have done that, you have your rationale buttoned up tight and in your back pocket versus I think if you don't spend that time up front, David, to your exact point, do your homework up front. Get your stuff together up front and be ready for that. And we do that anytime we do purpose related things. We think about what that backlash is going to be, how we would respond to it. If we don't have a good response to it, we're not moving forward with that thing.
Yeah,
But if
yeah.
we feel like we can stand up and take the heat and defend our position authentically and from our purpose place, then game on. Like, not a problem.
I love that. I love that. Thank you for sharing. I think you shared some incredible examples of what I would call wins that also have impact in the community. But are there other recent wins that you and Haleon have recently had in cultural fluent marketing, and maybe a little bit of the story?
So I'd love to talk about a not sexy win.
We love not sexy wins.
The Advil win to me is like a very sexy one. Sexy is not the right word, but one that I think a lot of people can really connect to emotionally. But I think we wouldn't get there if we don't do some of the other sort of legwork and not sexy stuff. So what I'd love to talk about is, as we've gone on this journey, one of the things that we've done to try to help people with that mindset shift is to create what we call a cultural fluency audit, which is forcing people to go in and actually audit themselves with cross-functional partners against their foundational understanding, how they're executing their marketing, how they're developing their innovation, and giving themselves scores on inclusive marketing. So not targeted marketing, but inclusive marketing. So when you do your research, are you making sure that you have an inclusive sample when you do your research? Stuff like that, real basic things, but actually forcing people to go through that exercise and look down that hygiene and check your boxes, I think was eye-opening to certain people, because some people were like, "Oh yeah, we've got some targeted marketing against African Americans or Hispanics. So we've got that inclusive marketing thing nailed." But then when you pull the layers back and go, "Well, what do you understand about their need?" And they're like, "Oh," or what motivates them, what their values are. Like, you don't understand that? Well, then how are you doing really great marketing against that consumer group? So for us, it was really helpful to have definition and clarity and a framework for people. And we pulled it through as part of our business planning last year. So as people came into business planning, they had to actually articulate, okay, where did I fall? Where was I doing well? Where are opportunities for me in those different buckets? And it was, I think, a bit of a shift for us.
Tina, I find that super sexy.
I do too, but I'm a bit of a geek, so I think I'm a little biased, but
No,
yeah.
that makes me a geek as well. So, wow. So that is the definition of a strategic approach. That
Yes.
you're not in the advertising side, playing with things, that you're actually thinking through it strategically in a very comprehensive way. So congrats. My last question in this area is, we're privileged of working with and partnering with leading brands across 12 different categories. And what I will tell you is, this may be one of those areas where everybody is seeking best practices. And even the companies and the brands that you think, oh, they've done this for 25 years, they know exactly how to do it. They're changing, they're evolving, they're figuring out. It's hard. Um, what advice would you give others that are trying to figure this out?
My first one is always know who you are and stay true to that. Don't get sucked into something because there's a trend or you feel the need to put a rainbow on or talk about some big movement that's happening. Like, stay true to who you are and be authentic. Because if you're not, people will sniff that out and you're going to get way, way worse than. So, one, be true to yourself. Two, I think is um, do that not sexy hygiene stuff. So, really do your homework, really get in there and make it happen. And then last, actually, I got four, but two more. One, progress over perfection. So don't sit there and be like, oh, I can't launch this. I can't do it because it's not going to be perfect. What you'll find is a lot of folks who sit in these communities are so happy and grateful for people talking to them and listening to them, that they'll give you some forgiveness if you're not perfect. They don't expect you to be perfect, but going out there and being authentic and trying and working with them, I think is people will really appreciate and are very grateful for. So don't think you have to be perfect. Don't be afraid. And then the last piece I think is it's a journey. It's a journey. It's not a project. It's not like you could put somebody on it and say it's a project and check the box. It is constantly changing, to your point. Like, when I think about where we were 3 years ago and where we are today, it's so different. And you have to always know who those people are that feel like they're not being heard, and how do you understand them and how do you amplify their voices. So that's the other thing I would say is it's a journey, and you're actually never done, and you're
Wow.
never the best.
Wow. You've shared some gold here. That is awesome. Thank you. So, we are moving away from the portion around us learning from you, and now we want to learn about you. A couple of personal questions, Tina. First, what are the things that inspire you or motivate you?
So I think things that inspire and motivate me there's certain the values that motivate me, which are making a difference. So making a difference wherever I am. So making things better, improving people's lives. That's why I'm in healthcare. So being in healthcare to improve people's lives is a big piece of why I do what I do. And I've done it my whole career. I've always been in consumer healthcare. I think then when I work with people, making a difference for them and helping them grow is big. And then even like when I think about my friends and my family, I'm always wanting to help and help them grow as well. I think it probably goes back to my parents and my grandparents were all teachers. And so I did not want to be a teacher, but I think that teaching gene is in the blood. And so there's a desire to always help people grow and help them discover things that they never realized before.
That is fantastic. What a great alignment with the industry that that you're in. Can you share what you're doing now and what excites you about the future?
So I think what's been big for me actually this summer is there's the area of cultural fluency, which I'm still very, very passionate about. And I still think that that's going to be digital. I think what's coming behind that. So what's a little bit further back is generative AI. So it's not AI, it's generative AI. And I get really up on a soapbox about that one with people because it is the large language models and it's what's happening there. So for me as an insights person, that is going to revolutionize, I think, the insights function and how we do things. And I want to be on the forefront of it versus on my back foot. So I'm really trying to learn more about that now in my professional life, but also in my personal life. I'm a mom of 3 kids. My kids are hitting their teenage years now. They're super busy. And I have found ChatGPT to be like my best buddy of my little assistant, help me in New York planning and finding places to go. And, what does this mean? And who is this person? And what does that, jargon mean? So it's really been like a little secret weapon for me with my with my family also. So I think the more that I learn about it, the more that I can sort of tap into it. I think it's going to help me professionally, but also personally.
So it really shows such a growth mindset that you're using it individually and sort of applying it professionally. It's interesting. Um, as you may know, we're in the process as we speak of training our own model in a culturally intelligent way because I think in the Gen AI world, data in some ways is the hero, and we're inundated with proprietary data. And as you know, most models are actually culturally biased. So we're right. So we're like super excited with the notion of a culturally intelligent model.
I am so
Yeah.
excited. I'm excited about that too, David. And I'm all about the data in, data out. So like whatever you can put in, the output is as good as the data that you put in. And you guys have an amazing data set that I think can just be massively tapped into. I'm very excited. I can't wait
Yeah.
for that. So
Yeah. So stay tuned. All right. Here's
yeah.
the toughy one. If you could travel back in time and give your 20-year-old self advice, what would it be from a professional standpoint?
I think if I could go back in time and advise my professional self. So I actually started in brand management. Um, and I think what I might say to myself is it to encourage myself to get some more diverse experience earlier in my career. I think that's the only thing as I look back. I'm really glad that I have marketing and marketing research because I think the diversity that I have of experience helps me be a better researcher. But if I could go back and, work in the HCP area from a marketing perspective and carry a bag and like go out there and do different things or call on Walmart, like I think having even more diverse experiences is better and I wish I could have done like a rotational leadership program or something. So I think that's where I wish, and that's what I would advise my 20-year-old self to do.
That's awesome. Obviously, it hasn't had any impact in your incredible trajectory. So thanks for sharing that. Last question. What do you do for fun outside of work?
I am a voracious reader, so I love to read books. One of my children, my oldest daughter, is also a voracious reader, so it's hard to find books that I like, but I seem to find I'm reading a lot of young adult fiction now because we share books. She likes to use my shoes. I take her books. It's a nice sharing moment. So I love to read. I love to read. I also have been listening to a lot of podcasts recently and also just listening to a lot of music. I find my kids are really big in Spotify.
Yeah.
And I love their playlists. And we play a game called Rate My Music. We did it this morning. I did it this morning with my 12-year-old. We're in the car and she plays her music and I get to rate it 1 to 10. And I can skip if I want to, but it's a really great way actually to get to know your kids too, without asking them all those uncomfortable questions. So I find that's a big thing for me too, is just music and podcasts, and learning more.
Fantastic. Well, Tina, thank you very much. Before we close, if people want to find you or initiatives at Haleon, what's the best way?
Yeah. So the best way to connect with me is LinkedIn. So that's my sort of home base, I would say, for any kind of contacts. And I often will post there, talks that I've given or things that I'm passionate about. So they could absolutely connect with me there.
Tina, I really, really appreciate your time. What you have shared is going to have so much benefit. I think you've really shared what I would call best practices in thinking through cultural fluency, which we believe should be a corporate imperative if you're trying to win, the American consumer landscape. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
To our listeners, thank you for your time today. And if you learned something today that's new, or if you laughed, tell somebody about the podcast. Again, Tina, thank you so much. This has been a super exciting episode of Cultural Fluency Makers, and see you all next time. That's a wrap on another episode of Cultural Fluency Makers. Thank you for joining us. Please share your comments and what you would like to hear more about. Be as specific as possible. For show notes and more, please visit culturalfluencymakers.com. This show is proudly sponsored by Collage Group, unleashing the power of cultural intelligence to fuel brand growth. Please follow Collage Group on LinkedIn, and we will see you next week.